Hello, dear friends. Welcome back to Be Vision, a channel dedicated to sharing knowledge for holistic self-development through books. In 1957, the Swedish Academy awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature to a French writer, citing, for his important literary production, which with clear-sighted earnestness illuminates the problems of the human conscience in our time. That brilliant writer was Camus, and he became one of the youngest Nobel laureates in human history. Camus was a renowned philosopher, novelist, and playwright who dedicated his life to exploring the meaning of existence. At just 29, he penned his profound thoughts on the value of a person's life in a philosophical essay, which is the very book I want to introduce and share with you today. It's titled The Myth of Sisyphus, exploring the question, if human life is absurd, what should we do? In ancient Greek mythology, Sisyphus was punished by the gods for his transgressions. His task was to roll a giant boulder up a steep mountain. However, each time Sisyphus exerted all his strength to push the rock to the peak, it would immediately roll back down to the foot of the mountain. Sisyphus had no choice but to descend and push the boulder back up again. This continued day after day, for all eternity. In the eyes of the gods, only meaningless and hopeless labor was the most dreadful punishment. And isn't this very essence of hopelessness strikingly similar to our own lives? Don't you see? We repeat ourselves every single day. Today repeats yesterday, today's rhythm continues tomorrow. Familiar work, familiar routines. It seems that most of the time we navigate life without much thought. Wake up, drive to work, eat, sleep, then repeat on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, the same steady rhythm. One day you might suddenly ask yourself, why? Why do we have to repeat this life, day in and day out? And then you can't help but reflect on your own life, wondering what's the point of living like this? We've rushed tirelessly like a program just to acquire things for tomorrow, for later, constantly chasing the future. Eventually, one day, people realize they are 50, 70 years old, and now they must face something else. Death. Death is always there, waiting for us, drawing closer each day. You'll realize that for many people, there will always be a time when they have no tomorrow. And without tomorrow, there is no future. So, where do you think the meaning of life for these people should be placed? This is a passage recounted in the book and also an allegory the author wants to convey to everyone. We exist in a life full of absurdity. The essence of life is absurd. Imagine we have mountains, and on the peaks of these mountains are titles like good performance, promotion, retirement. We repeat every task each day to ascend these peaks. We always think, if I'm busy for a while, it will be okay. Once the mortgage is paid off, everything will be good. If I work hard to earn money, I'll have a better time in retirement. However, life is an endless river. After overcoming one obstacle, other obstacles await us. You struggle to push the boulder up the mountain, finally reaching the summit. As you prepare to celebrate and take a deep breath to savor the moment, the boulder immediately rolls back down. This intractable problem will never end. We keep pushing the boulder up, but once it reaches the top, it immediately falls. The final point of your journey quickly becomes a new beginning. This cycle repeats. We continue to push the boulder up the mountain forever, just like Sisyphus. Most people are ordinary. To put it more bluntly, everyone has truly been handed a death sentence from the moment they are born. We are born and then we depart. Therefore, according to Camus, the essence of life is absurd. So, faced with this absurdity, what will you choose to do? To resist or to surrender? And how can humans overcome this cycle of reincarnation? If the image of Sisyphus pushing the boulder up the mountain is etched into your mind, then it's also when you begin to perceive the absurdity of life, and you desire to seek the true meaning of life for yourself. Only when you see life as absurd can you truly live it well. If you read this book for the first time, you might feel utterly confused because it's not an easy read. First, we need to understand Camus's philosophy of absurdism to truly grasp what he wants to convey. Absurdity, to be precise, is the confrontation between human reason and the unreasonableness of life on this earth. For absurdism, the essence of everything is an illusion. It points out that when one is born human, they are stepping onto a cold, harsh, and absurd reality. Our fate is predetermined. Death. This death is like the sword of Damocles, hanging over our heads, ready to fall at any moment. Because humans, with their finite existence, can never escape the truth that we are destined for death. Even if we embark on a new life, death begins to draw near from the moment we are born. The second point is that life in this world is inherently an illusion. According to Lacan's mirror stage theory, when an infant first sees its own image in a mirror, it doesn't think it's themselves. But when the child is between 5 and 18 months old, upon seeing themselves in the mirror, they feel overwhelmed by the person in the mirror. They will consider the image in the mirror to be themselves, but in reality, it's just a false image reflected through the mirror. The true absurdity comes from, how can you know that you are not the false image, or that the person in the mirror is not the real you? In summary, we repeat many lives, many existences within an illusion. This is an absurdity, yet we are unaware. Therefore, only when you suddenly have a realization and question whether this life is an illusion, why you live such a monotonous, repetitive life day after day, and if death is unavoidable, then what are you living for? With such questions, that's when absurdity truly appears. That is, you truly recognize the absurdity. Facing absurdity, there are 3 types of people. Who are you when you realize that life is truly absurd? How do we typically react? According to the author, people usually take one of 3 approaches. The first type chooses physical termination ***. When people realize the absurd reality that life cannot escape the shadow of meaninglessness, the easiest and simplest solution is suicide. It's like standing at the abyss of hopelessness. Rather, life is an exile without redemption. Even when wanting to resist, even when trying to reach the peak, life still ends in absurdity, like a random pebble falling into a deep river, eventually sinking into oblivion. To resolve this absurd situation, they choose suicide. The person contemplating death is voicing their anxiety, pleading for a restoration of existence after the failure of their anonymous identity. Philosopher Martin Heidegger suggested that we should continue to live in a meaningless world, even when this world has decayed and rotted. Additionally, his most famous saying is, being towards death. In essence, choosing to end one's life is an admission that life has overwhelmed us, and people don't truly understand life itself. Suicide is a choice that signifies surrender to the absurd truth. The second type chooses a philosophical death ***. What does it mean to end one's life philosophically? This means they believe in a metaphysical eternity, abandoning or escaping many things in the present. For example, Christians will not commit suicide because suicide means going to hell, and thus, after death, they cannot attain eternal life in the imaginary picture of the other shore. Tolstoy also said that most people need a god because they have nothing at all. A few also need a god because they have everything. Only when people cannot achieve what they desire do they turn to God. If, in the traditional sense, God is perfect, then why did God create humans in an imperfect state, yet demand a perfect life after death? This is no different from a rallying cry, a destination that people have set in the process of climbing to the mountain peak. If one uses eternity as a crutch, unwilling to give their all to current reality, believing that there will be a better life after death, then the very act of believing in God also becomes absurd. One philosopher said that before death arrives, death does not affect humans. After death, humans cannot perceive death. Therefore, death is not a bad thing. However, according to Camus, if seeking something metaphysical for protection, to avoid exerting oneself fully in the present reality, to simply give up, then this is, in fact, a form of escaping reality. Living becomes an attitude of self-deception. The third type is resistance ***. Based on human experience, the theory of reincarnation asserts that even if the physical body dies, the soul is not destroyed. Or, according to atomism, time is endless. Atoms allow the soul to exist in a physical body, and at the end of a human life, it disintegrates, but the energy is not lost. It recombines to create a new human existence. This is also the reality that no one can step into the same river twice. Even in a new life, you will still be a new person and continue to repeat meaningless things every day. That's why Camus said, because life is meaningless, it is all the more worth living. Life itself is the strongest resistance to absurdity. Resistance, first and foremost, is a clear awareness of life's absurd nature. Always question the world. Always face yourself and see through the absurd essence of life. Wake up from unconscious, repetitive daily routines and stop being a puppet of certain values, of comparison, of power, of domination. Furthermore, resistance is also manifested in no longer living for a fleeting future or an imagined purpose, but living for this very moment, for every second in the present. What are the usual self-deceptions we engage in during life? We often imagine a future goal, then dedicate everything we have to meet the requirements to achieve that goal, simultaneously living in a future, in a tomorrow filled with eager hopes. In this way, you believe that achieving the goal, reaching that mountaintop, is true life. This is the joy and happiness I've long awaited. As for the time before the boulder reaches the peak, everything here is just a preparatory phase for you to enjoy the fruits of your labor. Everything is temporary, and you wouldn't consider this life. But what if we discover that reaching the mountaintop is a perpetual lie, a truth that our future and hope can be stripped away at any moment? We also need to know that precisely because tomorrow's future and hope are not entirely within our control, what we can decide is to wholeheartedly live for the present. The author beautifully states, "To commit fully to the future means to devote everything to the present. The meaning of life is the whole of life." Sisyphus tirelessly pushes the boulder up the mountain, knowing that no matter how hard he pushes, it will always roll down. So, in such a desperate situation, why doesn't Sisyphus choose suicide? It's because Sisyphus has consciousness. He knows full well that he will never be able to push the boulder up the mountain, and he knows this is the god's punishment. He doesn't want to commit suicide because suicide is a sign of cowardice. It means affirming that this life is meaningless, affirming his own incompetence, and that he is being punished. But we must note that the resistance Camus wants to convey is neither longing nor hope. Sisyphus resolutely pushes the boulder up the mountain every day not because he still harbors some hope that he can escape this punishment. In fact, Camus strongly resists what he calls hope. In Camus's philosophy, hope is the most dreadful thing of all, because hope can rationalize all previous calamities and sufferings, and people will feel that the future will surely be better. For example, Mencius said, "Heaven is about to confer a great office on someone. It first exercises their mind with suffering, and their sinews and bones with toil." Many people agree with this view, believing that the suffering you encounter is to train you for success. The difficulties you go through are to enhance your undeveloped abilities, and this has brought much hope to many people for the future. But for Camus, he clearly disagrees with this view. He believes that rationalizing all difficulties is the most terrifying disaster, because some people will overinvest in a vague hope for the future and passively endure their present circumstances. However, in reality, they undergo no inner or outer change. Camus's perspective here is, give positive value to life's suffering right now, for it is only then that it can affirm the value of one's own existence. Sisyphus suffers, but in those days of painful ascent, joy can also exist. When he descends the mountain, he finds reason to resist the absurdity in those endless months. Instead of holding on to the hope of receiving divine favor by working diligently, he chooses to find joy in his thorny process. This is, in fact, simply accepting an irresistible fate, knowing in advance the tragic, unavoidable consequences each day, yet bravely bearing it all. It also helps us realize the true meaning of life, to accept absurdity and focus on living in the present, just as Camus wrote. The struggle itself toward the summits is enough to fill a man's heart. The meaning of life is the whole of life, just as the meaning of a journey is all the moments throughout your travels. By choosing to enjoy the process of pushing those boulders up the mountain, Sisyphus believes that each push is a moment of realizing his passionate life. What is important is not the highest quality of life, but the greatest number of experiences. This is the statement that truly awakened me. According to Camus, because humans feel the boredom of life, it is beneficial. Only when you realize that this world is an illusion can you awaken the consciousness of resistance and ignite a series of situations that allow you to rediscover the precious things in your own life. So, how can we overcome the absurdity of life? Here, the author proposes 4 attitudes towards life. 1. Fight absurdity with love. Give as much love as you possibly can. 2. Face absurdity as if it's a film with a predetermined ending. You know you are an actor playing a scripted role, but you still strive forward, experiencing life as much as possible. 3. Dedicate yourself fully to life and continuously progress. Like the old man in The Old Man and the Sea, who fished for days only to bring back a skeleton. He embodies a loser but possesses an unyielding spirit, calmly accepting defeat and facing death. This means that humans will never succumb to fate. 4. Create. Struggle against absurdity through creation by truly documenting and writing about the state of existence in Camus's absurd world. Life is truly meaningless, and we cannot have a hopeful future, yet we must actively engage in the present and live without hesitation. This is the ultimate resistance to absurdity, even when the outcome is predetermined to be failure. Sisyphus's life is also a portrait of Camus himself. He lived a life confronting absurdity. When he was less than a year old, his mother was born deaf and struggled to speak clearly, with sad eyes. She did odd jobs to support the family. His paternal grandmother was coarse, overbearing, and often sullen, occasionally hitting him when he was young. As a child, Camus was a school football team goalkeeper. Later, he contracted tuberculosis and had to bid farewell to his beloved sport. All these hardships followed him from childhood into adulthood. He was betrayed by his wife, who also became an addict. He tried many times to save her, but ultimately, all efforts were in vain. But all this suffering could not deter Camus. Instead, it inspired him to gain deep insight into human nature and ignited his passion for literature. In his short life, he wrote many masterpieces that profoundly influenced the world. Perhaps in our lives, we may not become great individuals, but who says ordinary people cannot live life in their own unique style? Even small moss can bloom like a peony. As long as you recognize yourself, facing all the sun, rain, wind, storms, and frost, you can still grow and blossom right within your own journey. No one can stop you from becoming the best version of yourself except you. Life is inherently absurd. If you believe that a certain event is entirely logical and meaningful, this means you only follow the path you deem logical to achieve it, right? And you think that if you don't follow this path, you are definitely wrong, and when you don't succeed, you feel like a failure and you suffer because of it. In life, we often fall into such dilemmas, but life doesn't actually have to be that way. We don't have a standard answer. Don't believe any of those answers. Be cautious of every suggestion from people who tell you who you should be and what you should do. Be wary of those who offer advice on your path and planning. The very act of your living carries its greatest meaning. Perhaps this is the answer for ourselves and the best way to fight against absurdity, against nihilism, as Camus said. What matters is not living the most, but living the most abundantly. May all of us live in the present, act with love, and live fully in every moment.